Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we are looking at Stella Lee Wildcard. So Stella Lee is from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander decks. She is a 3-mana Izzet Commander. She's a 2/4 and she has 2 abilities. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. And tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, but you can only activate this if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn. So, the main thing that Stella Lee is going to be used for is infinite combos that involve copying spells that untap her so that you can keep tapping her to copy those spells over and over and over. So with that said, we're going to, 1, need those copy cards, those untapping cheap spells that we can use to copy and untap her over and over. And we're going to need a bunch of cheap spells that we can cast to enable the if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn ability. So before we move on to everything else, let's just cover the combos. So the most obvious one is going to be Cerulean Wisps. Target creature becomes blue until end of turn, untap that creature, draw a card. So if you cast Cerulean Wisps and you have a Stella Lee in play that is not summoning sick, you can hold priority with Cerulean Wisps on the stack, activate Stella Lee, copying the Cerulean Wisps, which will untap Stella Lee, drawing a card. And then while the Cerulean Wisp is still on the stack, you will activate Stella Lee again, copying the Cerulean Wisps over and over and over, allowing you to draw your entire deck. The same is true for Refocus and Twitch. So these are 3 cards that allow you to untap Stella Lee and draw a card. So if you've got Stella Lee without Summoning Sickness and any of these 3 cards, you can draw your entire deck, and then you can win with anything in your deck, like Thassa's Oracle being the most obvious one. Additionally, we have some more untappers in Dramatic Reversal. So Dramatic Reversal untaps all your non-land permanents. This is typically used in the Dramatic Scepter combo, so you imprint it onto Isochron Scepter, and then in combination with Mana Rocks that can produce 3 or more mana, you can generate infinite mana. In this case, all you need is Dramatic Reversal, Stella Lee that is not summoning sick, and any Mana Rock, and you can generate infinite mana. The same basic principle is also going to be true for Hidden Strings. So Hidden Strings, which will be most familiar to people that know the Lotus Field combo deck in Pioneer, is a spell that says you may tap or untap target permanent, then you may tap or untap another target permanent. So it lets you untap 2 permanents. So one of the permanents can be Stella Lee, and then the other permanent can be a land, let's say, and you can use that to generate infinite mana. Obviously, you then need something to do with that infinite mana, but this is a way of creating an infinite mana combo. And then our final card, which is going to be a combo in and of itself, is Twisted Fealty. So this is a 3-mana red sorcery, and it's gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn, so it's an untapper. And then it says create a Wicked Roll token attached to up to 1 target creature. So a Wicked Roll token is an enchantment token that gives +1/+1, and when the token is put into a graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life. And you can only have 1 roll token at a time. So when you get a roll token, any other roll tokens on the card fall off. So the combo here is, again, you need Stella Lee without Summoning Sickness. You need 3 mana. You go cast Twisted Fealty, targeting the Stella Lee. You hold priority, and you, of course, copy the Twisted Fealty with Stella Lee. So as part of the ability, it untaps Stella Lee, and then it gives Stella Lee a Wicked Roll token. All right, now Stella Lee is untapped. So you activate Stella Lee again. You do the same thing. And now when you create a Wicked Roll token, she already has a Wicked Roll token on her, so the Wicked Roll token falls off. That causes it to trigger, and the opponents lose 1 life. You then repeat infinite times, creating infinite Wicked Roll tokens, untapping Stella Lee infinite times, your opponents get drained out. So Twisted Fealty is the best of the combo cards, but you can obviously just use any of these other combo cards to get to that point. So if you've got, for example, Cerulean Wisps, you can just draw your whole deck until you find Twisted Fealty or Oracle. So you don't actually need both of these, but having both of them gives you a little bit of redundancy in case at least one of them goes away. Now, secondly, are going to be the rest of the untap effects, so the ones I didn't cover already. So claim the Firstborn, gain control of target creature with mana value 3 or less, untap it, gains haste until end of turn. So it's an untapper, but it's also a 1 mana spell that gives her haste. So if you didn't have haste already, but you had one of these other effects, say, you can use Claim the Firstborn to give her haste. Shore Up is a protection spell. Target creature you control gets +1 in hexproof and untap it. So obviously, this deck is built around comboing with Stella Lee. We need to make sure she doesn't die. So this is a way of untapping her that also protects her. Obviously, we're going to want haste as well, because we don't want to cast Stella Lee and then have to pass the turn. So there are many, many cards that grant haste that we could play. These are the ones that I thought were the best in terms of them being the cheapest or having additional utility. It's important that we play Stella Lee and then not have to pay additional mana afterwards. So the only one that requires us to do that out of them is Claim the Firstborn, but all of the rest give her haste by default. So Ashling's Prerogative, As it enters, when it enters, you choose odd or even, and then all the creatures, including your opponents, with that mana value get haste. But every creature that isn't with that mana value enters tapped. So obviously you choose odd, Stella Lee and any other odd creatures enter with haste, and all even creatures enter tapped. Hall of the Bandit Lord as your land. Mass Hysteria gives everything haste, period. Need for Speed requires you sack a land, but they can then give Stella Lee haste without having to pay any mana. And Torch Courier sacks itself to give another creature haste, so again, you can give Stella Lee haste without having to pay any mana. The next thing we're going to need to satisfy is that 3 spell restriction. So when you cast your second spell, exile the top, and you get to play the spell from the top, is helpful in terms of generating value or getting you that extra spell that you need, but we still need actual cheap or free spells that we can use to get to this point. So we're obviously going to need to play a bunch of cheap cantrips, and this is not every single cantrip that exists, but this is the suite that I thought were the best ones. So Brainstorm, Consider, Preordain, Sleight of Hand, Ponder, these are obvious, just like easy cantrips that we can play for 1 mana. Overmaster is the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn, can't be countered, draw a card. So it's another cantrip that if we are playing it prior to casting our combo card like Twisted Fealty or Cerulean Wisp, make sure that our opponent can't counter those at least. Frantic Search and Gitaxian Probe are free. And then Highway Robbery is free if we plot it. So that does require that we either plot it before casting Stella or waiting a turn, but it's another spell that we can cast for free that just cycles itself. We're also going to want some card draw, so Mystic Remore and Rhystic Study are the obvious ones. Ring is also pretty obvious. Archmage Emeritus is whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Obviously, we're in a Spellslinger deck that's playing a bunch of cheap cantrips, so this is pretty good. We're not always going to be able to get this combo off, or maybe our opponents counter Stella or kill her when she's on the field. We do need ways of acquiring more cards, either after Stella Lee dies to recuperate, or even before her just to get all the cards that we need. Bunch of counterspells, which double up as ways of protecting Stella Lee and the combo. So in particular, things like Pact Negation, it's not an issue if we cast this if we're going to win on the same turn. Things like Spell Pierce can be used easily because, hey, it doesn't matter. We're casting this pretty early. Delay and Miscast are also going to fall into that same general category. A bit of fast mana, again, it helps if we can play Stella Lee and have additional mana open to cast more spells to combo off as fast as possible. Stormkiln Artist allows us to create treasure tokens when we cast instant and sorcery, so this is another way of just generating additional value. Lands are pretty straightforward. Some particular ones to highlight are things like Manamo, which is another land that can untap stuff. In this case, Stella Lee isn't always going to be used to just straight up combo. She can be used just as a value card. So things like Manamo can help just get 1 additional untap on her to draw an extra card. This is also going to work on the ring. So more about that is that, yeah, we're not always going to combo. So let's say we've got Stella Lee, but we don't actually have any combo pieces. Well, casting a Consider and then copying a Consider is fine. That's fine. We can just, get extra cards off of this, extra value off of this. She doesn't always have to be a combo piece. Obviously, protection, so Cavern of Souls so she doesn't get countered. Misdirection and Deflecting Swat as ways of swerving stuff away. Spellskite to redirect. Defense Grid so that she doesn't get countered or killed on the same turn, or at least it makes that stuff more expensive. Bunch of ramp spells. You could play a little bit more. I had to shave some stuffs for space. This is, I think, the best suite of ramp cards that we can play given that fact. A little bit of removal. Also, Snap counts as a removal spell that can also count as a way of getting Stella Lee back into your hand if you need to save her from removal, and of course untaps land, so it's a free spell. Chain of Vapor similarly can be used to get Stella Lee back into your hand to save her from removal, or it can be used as a way to cast more spells. So let's say you've got something that costs 0, like, I don't know, Mox Opal, for example. You can cast the Chain of Vapor, bounce your own Mox Opal to your hand, then recast the Mox Opal. You can also copy the Chain of Vapor by sacking your lands. So the Chain of Vapor alone can be a way to get up to the 3 spell minimum that you need to go off with Stella Lee. Cyclonic Rift, always good. A little bit of tutoring. There are more tutors that we could play, like Personal Tutor, Solve the Equation. Those are a little expensive. I figured these seemed like the best one. Personal Tutor also is a sorcery speed thing that puts something on top of your deck, but if you're looking for more ways of just making sure that you always have the combo, these can be added to. Again, I would add Personal Tutor, Intuition, and Solve the Equation probably is like the number 1 way. Spellseeker's another way to get the necessary cards into our hand. And that is pretty much going to cover it. Now, one thing is that this is one of those decks where I actually wound up having to cut a lot of stuff for space. So I normally don't do this, but in the case of Stella Lee, I added a Considering tab. So here, there were some additional like cantrip style effects that I had. So like Opt and Serum Visions I figured were the worst of the cantrips, and I cut them just for space. But if you're looking for more cantrips, these are a good addition. Dragon's Rage Channeler is a way to filter into cards that you need. Rite of Flame and Strike It Rich is more fast mana. I mentioned Intuition, but you could add things like Solve the Equation and Personal Tutor here. And then some combo cards that I opted not to play. So Shrieking Drake is a card that alone lets you get to the 3 spell minimum that you need to activate Stella Lee, because it can bounce itself. So you cast Shrieking Drake, it bounces back to your hand. You cast Shrieking Drake again, it bounces back to your hand. And then whatever 3rd spell is the requirement for you to go off is then viable. Underworld Breach is another combo card. Now this deck isn't playing Brain Freeze or Lion's Eye Diamond or any of those cards that would normally make Underworld Breach a combo card. You could add that. You could also use it as a way to get stuff back. So let's say you casted Twisted Fealty earlier and your opponent countered it, for example, right? And you need a way to play that card again because you need a way to combo. If you're looking for some sort of redundancy, you could add Breach to the deck. Mind Over Matter is a card that makes every untap effect, or rather, it makes every cantrip effect a way to combo. So let's say you don't have Cerulean Wisp, but you've got Consider, right? So if you can copy Consider, you can then use Mind Over Matter to untap Stella Lee with the card you draw, and then you can just filter that, drawing your whole deck until you find the card that you're actually going to use to win. In this case, I opted not to play it because it's a bit on the expensive side. It is 6 mana, but if you want to turn every single cantrip in your deck into a combo card, this is a way to do it. But with that said, that is going to do it for Stella Lee Wildcard in EDH.